You know, when you just wake up, that feeling of just being groggy and just opening those eyes for the first time. Sometimes people are morning people, but if you're not a morning person, being woke is not really the one. So I just think, that sensitivity of actually getting up, starting a new day, all that sort of stuff, it brings excitement to some people. You can go overboard a little bit as well, but you are groggy when you wake up, and that is what happens when people are too woke for their own good. Anyway, we out here. And it's good to be here, as always. And, one thing I was thinking about the other day, before I get into this episode of the update, is just, man, like, we are a generation of people who definitely can get distracted a lot. The TikToks of this world, the Snapchat, the Instagrams, things taking us away. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, sometimes... Are you really watching a movie with someone if they say, hey, let's watch a movie, let's choose a movie, and then they just scroll on their phone? Like, that is not, for me, watching a movie. It's just hard, and it's funny as well, like the way that people say that they get information now. It's like, oh, I watched something on TikTok or I watched something on Facebook, and it's just interesting. Like now, it used to be, oh, my teacher said this, or the doctor said this, or credible people who you think have learned a little bit about all of this stuff. And now, I'm not saying that the people on TikTok or Instagram are not learned people, but it's weird. Everyone has access to knowledge now, so everyone thinks that they, have some sort of stake in everything that is happening, so they have the chance to be able to converse on everything, which I think is cool. There are definitely aspects to it, but... now I think we're only getting the short glimpses. We're only getting the little bits that appease us, or the little bits that kind of tick our knickers or something, whatever that saying is. But the stuff that we hear, that we grab onto, but we don't actually understand the entire context of it, because there's just so much information now that I think we're getting a wide breadth of everything, but rarely anyone actually going into depth on the different topics. But go tell that to anyone who knows a lot about vaccinations, and I'm not talking about the people with PhDs in this stuff, I'm talking about the people who know how to use Facebook. But anyway, it's good to be here. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for always loving the support. I ain't got you. So I'd like to say that we have a pretty good supportive crew here. So you like the updates that I do about how I'm living my life, and I guess some of you can relate to a lot of that stuff as well. But then at the same time, I like making sure that we are giving some sort of content of the stuff that I'm going through or thinking about. And something that I have been thinking about, I was talking about resolutions last time, and I know something that gets in the way of a lot of that is actually negative emotions, and I have spoken about this a lot. But what I want to start the year off is just letting people know that it's okay to have these emotions, and where some of them come from, and actually being able to describe them and be aware of them, because I think once we do that, we can start moving on, and we can build a foundation off all that stuff. But before we get into that, I just I want to say that huge shout out to my boy Fred over at Savage Origins Tattoos. So I got my left shin done, or my left shin and calf done. It was a 2-day process, so it was 2 full sessions of about, I think it was like 9 hours the first day, and then 7 hours the second day of just getting straight tatted. So consecutive days, which the first day was definitely, there was touch and go sometimes. I was just like, ooh, am I going to make it through this whole thing? But the second day, there was the first day that the needle went in, or the first line that he did when the needle went in. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. But no. Tattooing in itself, we had this weird conversation, and I've spoken to a few people about this, but how I'm like getting covered in tattoos, and I just have a plan for what's going to end up happening. But when I was 14, when I got my first tattoo, I wanted to be covered. And back then, having a tattoo wasn't, not many people had them. They weren't as acceptable. And back then, kind of most people covered their tattoos if they had any at all. But nowadays, it's almost like, who doesn't have a tattoo? So if you have pure skin still, I was envious of them. So if I've gone so far the other way now that I can't go back, obviously. But I'm super proud of the stuff that I'm getting, and I'm super proud of the connections that I have. So what people don't understand about getting tattoos is that it's on you for life most of the time, if you're not going to get some sort of treatment to get it off you. And secondly, you're actually with these people for a long period of time. My tattoos, I think the shortest one maybe took me a couple of hours, but I'm in there for full days chatting to the people. And Fred was the guy who tattooed me about 10 years ago. So my very first tattoo Sorry, my very first tattoo. My very first tattoo with Fred was about 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago. So I was about 17 when I got that one done. And it was my sleeve onto my chest. And it's awesome to see that he's thrived and he's been able to build his business and consistently grow and have his practice, but at the same time, just how much we have changed as people, but still having the values the same. And he really looked after me. He really looked after me. And you have awesome conversations. Like I understand that when I sit down with people, I get about an hour to interview them, but he basically just goes for 9 to 10 hour conversations, and we spoke the whole time. So over those 2 days, that's about 15 hours of conversation. So I've spent longer than 2 full days with him, just lying on a bed, having a gun, just away at me, putting ink in my body. So, it was awesome. The time that we give to it, but also the process, and just how intimate it is. It's such an intimate connection. He's putting something on you for life, but at the same time, he's sharing that space with you. And he's also sharing a lot about the knowledge of the art form, but also just talking about his family, talking about my family, talking about aspirations and where we want to go. There was it was a really, really cool moment to go through all of that. And when I was in it, I was kind of feeling like, everyone could want a tattoo at any point. I've wanted one. I wanted to get this one done for a very long time. But then I knew that if I get it after I get my PhD and graduate, it's going to feel like this is the next chapter. So I am calling this the next chapter of life, obviously, because I've moved on from one thing and moving into another. And then I go with a new shield on me as well as I do that. But anyway, so with that and just, thinking about that new chapter and thinking about who I want to be, a lot that I've talked about, as being that short-tempered person, or as being someone who is very in tune with how I feel, and sometimes getting that super swing of like how I feel. So like just going really, really one way, and just exploding, and then going really, really the other way, and just being so like about everything. And the fact that I'm able to say that's kind of what happens when I go through things is a huge step from where I was, where it would just happen, and then I would just say, well, that's just how I am. So me being able to accept it and understand that there are things that kind of lead me to that point is a huge advance from where I have been. So what I kind of wanted to talk to about today is just that we can talk about our emotions and we can start to kind of dissect what's actually happening when we think about these things. Now, you can think about it with yourself, you can think about it when you're talking about other people, but most of the times, if you're internalizing what's actually being said, you can start to think, okay, I'm not a weirdo, I just have these things happen, or also I actually do have emotions and there are things that I shouldn't push aside. Now that's the first thing I want to start talking about, is that because my emotions, when I was lying on that table getting super, super tattered, like I was so calm and I was really in the present in that moment. And then when I drove home, I had a really big reflection, just thinking, man, I'm a new person. I do feel like a new person. So when I say new year, new me, I'm just a new upgraded version of myself, and that my emotions are so much more in check. And I don't know if it's probably down to a bunch of things. Like I'm out in the sun a lot more. I'm with people that I really love. And this is the same thing that happened last time I was in Wellington. And I'm getting away from technology a little bit more, and I'm not at my desk all the time. So that's probably part of it as well. Definitely good weather can help with all that. But at the same time, I still, in this moment of feeling happy and thinking I have everything going on that I really want, I also still have those damn feelings that overwhelm me at different times. But I know that I'm getting better. And I know that even though I'm this person who comes on and talks about, we need to do this to make sure that this is happening. And people will look at me and be like, he's the master of habits. He's the master of his mind, all that sort of stuff. I still get days all the time. And I know it seems cliche because other people will be like, but you're stronger than other people. Yes, I do deal with this regularly and I talk about it a lot. And that's the first thing that I think we need to start doing, is actually taking time to talk about it with people, take a time to write it down for yourself and actually see it and process it. I think the common feelings about all of this stuff is a bit of a paradox, and I think I was stuck in this way for a very long time, and I think some of you probably are too, is just that we get yuck feelings. I know we do. And the easiest thing for us to do, and the common thing that I will start to do, is push people away, and maybe just bury myself into work. Like I get super, super productive. And it's kind of this paradox where we think because we're avoiding those yucky feelings, we're avoiding, say you had a confrontation, we avoid that person, and we avoid bringing up that topic that brings that conversation back to light. We think that doing that is going to suppress it and then it'll eventually go away. The paradox is that it's kind of like because of some sort of cognitive dissonance, is that we're like, okay, because we're not going to approach that, it's never going to come back up. The only problem is it does. It does, and it's worse, and it usually hits you when you're not quite prepared for it. So what we can start to do, and this is why I say we need to talk about it more, or actually process the emotions that are going on, is actually bring it to the light, and we can see it. Because in your head, you're thinking, if I bring it to the light, I'm going to see it, and it's going to be even yuckier because I'm going to see it some more. But the more you face it, it's just like anything else, I guess that's the thing with exposure therapy, is that you're seeing it more, and it's becoming a bit more normalized. But the only problem is when you do start to see it more, you have to process it, and you have to go through it. What are these different things that are bringing these emotions up? What's triggering it? And then when it does happen, how am I reacting to those different things? So, I think for most of us, we are still in that stage where if something brings us yucky feelings, it's easier just to retract and take yourself away. And then we become quite isolated because we know, we actually don't know what could trigger that coming up again. Now, I'm saying this when it comes to some yucky feelings. There are obviously going to be other yucky feelings that we're going to need to dig into a little bit more, but this is more like the sadness, the angriness, and the way that different things come up. So I think that's where we start. And I empathize with a lot of you who don't want to talk about your feelings because, feelings were something that got us into trouble. If you felt a certain way, or if you show any emotion, you're weak, and all that sort of stuff. And I think especially for us men, when we were playing contact sports, especially for here in New Zealand, rugby, even just, the friends you're growing up with and all that sort of stuff. If you had any emotion, if you cried, all that sort of stuff, you were weak, and all that stuff is changing. Like, people are starting to cry more, and there's like a real men cry, all of that sort of stuff. But that is, it makes sense in some circumstances, because some things, like, okay, your friend dies, someone close to you passes away, something really sad happens, you miss someone, you start to cry. That makes sense to a lot of people, because they're like, okay, this is something harsh, and that's why they're going to cry. But there are a lot of other feelings that we have that can force us to feel some way, but we might not necessarily cry, or other people might not necessarily deem as a worthy reason to cry. There is no reason for other people to cry, right? If something emotionally aggravates, or emotionally is huge for someone and they cry, it's because they have that overwhelming feeling. Now, I don't think that's something that's quite normalized yet. I'm not one of those people who just goes and cries all the time, but like, I do let it out, and if it does happen, I don't look at myself and be like, why the heck are you doing that? I just let it happen, and then I take some time, and then I feel better for it. I'm sorry, I'm going off topic, but so yeah, I just remember there's been a few times in my life where I would want to talk about how I was feeling about something with particular people who I felt transgressed or did something that I wasn't quite aware of, or I wasn't quite fond of when it happened. And I do know for the longest time, and actually it's only quite recently that these people have apologized and said, I didn't realize that it's because that's just the way you are. It's not really just the way I am. It's just something I like to face things when it happens. But I was called sensitive all of the time, and for a long time, I did start to believe maybe I am just being sensitive, and maybe these things aren't as big as they actually seem in my head. Whereas these people really just weren't very good at taking what I was saying to them, and they didn't want to own up and take any responsibility for what they were actually doing. So a lot of the time I did believe I was in the wrong, and that did mess with me a lot of the time. And because I don't like hurting people, or I don't like making people feel uncomfortable, I would then take it on and be like, maybe I am just too sensitive. And that's something that fucked with me for a very long time, and I couldn't understand why this would keep happening, where like I would have a problem with someone and I'd want to bring it up with them, and it'd just be told, you're just too sensitive. Because I was like, maybe I am, but at the same time, like, this really makes me feel like yucky. This really makes me feel like, you don't respect me. This merely makes me feel like all those different things. So it came to the point where I started believing I was the problem, which probably I was in a little bit. But at the same time, I not being able to have that dialogue, and having to shut those emotions out, instead of me talking with someone about it, I kind of just internalized it as, I am the problem. But yeah, so I just, I think with that as well, and just being, maybe I am a sensitive person with all those different things, but from when I was really, really young, I've always known that I'm quite the observant type of person. I'm the type of person who can sit around, and if I know someone enough, or if I meet people and I can feel their energy, like I feel like I know who I'm going to vibe with very early, because I know like what suits my energies, and I know what type of other energies can come into their energy and kind of complement it. I know the types of people who will come in and kind of have an ulterior motive, where they're just coming in to get something for their own gain, or they, just trying to use me to get to something else. And then I understand, with those people that I've built the connection with, I know when things are off. And something that I've said on this podcast before, and that I'll say again, is that something that I am quite notoriously known for, is when people are off and I just ask, hey, like you seem off, or you seem like something's up, or you're overthinking something. If you need to talk about anything, just let me know. And then people just always saying, oh, no, nothing's wrong, until at some point where I'm just like, you're really off. But yeah, all these people know, they're like, it's weird. You can see what we're feeling before we even feel it. And that's just from being around so many different people and being so aware of how I kind of compute emotion and then how I express it as well. So because I say someone's off, I don't say if someone's angry or someone's sad or anything like that. I can just tell when people are not quite themselves, or something has kind of on their mind and it's quite heavy. I feel like it's easy to see. Other people, not so much. And I think it's just, I don't know, I just like to read people. And I think that was more like a behavioral thing, so that I could see how I needed to approach different people. And it was more because I just hated confrontation. I didn't like people being mad at me. I didn't like people, thinking that I was the problem for something. So how I could avoid that is just understand where people are with their feelings, and what types of moods people are in, so that I can, act accordingly. And I thought that was normal, but apparently that's very rare, and I get told it a lot, that are just like, man, you're so onto it. Like you just always know when I'm off, or you always know when I'm happy, and you change depending on how we are. Not change in a bad way, but just like I alter myself so that I can make sure it's a comfortable environment for these people. So yeah, I just wanted to predict how some people would act, and that was more, just to keep myself safe. And also just because, that confrontation I wasn't a big fan of. But yeah, you ask anyone and they'll know. But I think that comes down to a lot of people not knowing really about their own emotions. And it's kind of true. Like I ask different people how they feel at different times, and the most common thing that comes up later is just that, like, oh, I didn't know how to talk about it. Sorry, ooh, that was yucky. Something that comes up, quite frequently is that when I talk about it, I'm like, hey, what's up? So what I've established with different people is being able to be a good listener, but also offering opportunities for people to speak to me if they want to, but not forcing, because I feel like we're in this place where it's like, it's not weak to speak or anything like that, but I don't think a lot of us are actually giving people the proper opportunity or the proper atmosphere to actually want to come out and speak. So what I do with a lot of my friends, I'll just be like, hey, if you don't have to text me back. I'm just coming in, I'm just checking in, make sure you're all good. Or if I'm talking to them, I'll be like, okay, there's a couple things. Do you just want me to listen? I can just listen. Or do you want me to provide a solution? Or do you just want to rant? And then I just take it in and just be like, and just empathize with you. So I do all those sorts of things. And I just be like, you can just vent with me and just talk through it, because then you can get a clearer picture of what's actually going on. And you don't have to give solutions, because sometimes when you do get a solution immediately after, you feel like, why did I tell you? You just you think I'm stupid. You think it comes with judgment. So yeah, that's what I do with my friends now, and it seems to be working. I think people can be a little bit more open, but I kind of think of this as, when you're speaking different languages with different people, so say for example, maybe not even languages as in like different dialects, but say you're with someone. So this was something that I would get often when I was in a relationship, is where I felt a certain way. I was trying to communicate it, and then it kind of wasn't being received well by the other person, who was just like, oh, I don't see it as a problem, all that sort of stuff. Now, obviously, maybe it wasn't a problem, all these different things. I was young, I was silly, but at the same time, it's like, you see children get really, really frustrated when they want to say something, but obviously they can't communicate it because they don't have the vocabulary for it. they get really frustrated. They get mad. They're just like throwing a tantrum because they're trying to show you that something is not quite right, but they don't actually know what emotion it is that they can tell you. Now, I think that is probably the same with a lot of people who don't have the vocabulary to describe how they actually feel about different things. Number one, they've never really felt, or they've never really known what it is that they are feeling. They just feel something, and then it just kind of takes over as stress or takes over as some sort of anger, because that anger can then manifest itself, but maybe that was an anger that came from some sort of sadness because they had something, they didn't know how to process it, and then it turned into anger or frustration with themselves for not being able to communicate that. All of that is just to say, a lot of us don't actually sit with our feelings and don't actually sit with the emotions and feel it out. We can't describe how it feels because we've never actually sat with our bodies long enough. And we're actually so quick to distract ourselves, like I said before, because if we feel that feeling, we feel like it's going to take us down. When really, sometimes we do just have to feel them and just kind of wrestle with them for a little bit to know what it's doing to your body. But then also the reasons why this might be coming up, because if it comes up for something that happens quite regularly, this is going to occur over and over again, and if you keep putting it off, the monster's just going to get bigger and bigger. So I've covered already the reasons why we don't want to feel at times, and I think it's the cognitive dissonance. Like I said before, you don't want to feel it because it sucks, and you think that the more that we talk about it, the more that it's going to bring it up, and then you're going to have to go through that whole shebang all over again. And I think also the reason why we don't talk about it is because, like I said before, we don't have the vocabulary to be able to explain it. Now, a lot of the time we understand the world through the language that we use, so I can tell you the different colors, I can tell you what something looked like based on the words. Everything that you're getting through your ear, unless you're watching it on YouTube, everything that you're getting is me describing situations. So I'm using my vocabulary to be able to describe something to you. If I didn't know what a certain color was, I would try to describe it to something near what I think that is. Like I'd say, oh, it's like, the color of the fire truck. And then you'll kind of have a picture in your head from there. If I'm feeling a certain way and I can feel it, but I don't actually know how to describe it, what is it actually doing to my body? What's it doing to my heart rate? What's it doing to my skin? What does it actually feel like to have those emotions? And then if I can't then describe what the emotion is, unless someone else has felt that, and unless someone else can kind of just see how you're acting and just be like, oh, that's this. But no one spends enough time with different people to actually understand that, unless this is your field or your area. So, we're all kind of in this together. And I think we start by just talking about it. But at the same time, knowing that we're going to get these feelings, and that these feelings come from certain places. So there's 4 Bs that they could come from. And when they do come from, understand that there is a reason for them happening. So it's biological. Some things just happen physiologically so that, through evolution, you feel a certain way because it's making you, mistrust something, or you're trying to, at the end of the day, minimize discomfort and actually increase likelihood of survival. There's also your biography. So your type of environment, the way that you were socialized, all these different things, like the way that some people react to different things, maybe because, back when they were younger, if they did something and their mother said something like that, it meant that they were happy with them. So how they react is when someone says that same thing, they're like, oh, it must be good, because it kind of takes them back to that moment, kind of like we're conditioned into those different things, like Pavlov's dogs. Every time the bell rung, they associated the bell ringing with being fed, so they'd start to salivate. But there's that biography, or your environment plays a huge role in how you actually are. So if you have everything at your disposal, kind of your urgency for different things is probably not going to be as high as someone who, didn't quite have it, but needed a little bit more. You also, your behavior, so that's how you show it. So you're going to have the emotion. And I always think about this quite often, because I think how you behave is really kind of like I think about this with me a lot, because I do know that a lot of my biggest arguments, and I can remember them, happen on really significant days, and I then associate the day with that feeling and that argument, and then it gets really, really sad for me, because I'm just like, this was meant to be my day. How can this person not understand what's happening here? And then I go through, and it really kind of gets in the way of everything that I was feeling that day. It gets in the way of, me actually trying to enjoy that moment. Like, I'm not one of those people who can pick up and move on very, very quickly, unless we had the chance to then chat about it then. But a lot of the people that I deal with, they're the types of people who, need to think on it for a little bit. And I'm not saying either way is correct, but I'm just saying, if I haven't dealt with it, or if I haven't been able to explain myself through it and just be like, hey, and talk with someone through it, or just be told that it's going to be okay, I can then end up showing that I'm not 100%, and it's really quite difficult for people to be around me. And then obviously there's the backstory. There's the backstory for all of that sort of stuff. So that was the backstory that I just explained. But I think from when we see it happening, we kind of assume the context from there. So that way we can understand, I think how things are presented, like I said before, aren't always the actual emotion that has been felt. It's just kind of presented in a different way. So if we are able to understand that backstory, then we can start to see why things are presenting the way that they are. And it's just the awareness of your ability to have these feelings. I think we should stop. We should get to the point now where we need to feel those feelings, and I spoke about that almost in an episode to the date 1 whole year ago. But I think if we are a bit more aware of these different things, and people are listening to this and they say, oh yeah, okay, maybe that didn't quite make sense to me, but I think what he's trying to say, or the gist of all this, is we need to start paying attention to how we're feeling, and we need to start kind of, seeing the rhythms or seeing the patterns of the ways that we do feel different things. Because I think the more we are aware of the different ways that we feel, that is when we can start to bring something to the forefront. So I think there's just distinguishing between different emotions. And I think another thing just to be aware of is that, like, I was thinking about this the other day, where like someone was talking about how comparison is evil and all that sort of stuff, and I was just like, I think, to be honest, I think comparison is going to be something that is very, very human, and just like us, it's how we associate that comparison. So what are the behaviors that we actually feel before that comparison comes in? So is this comparison changing the way that we are and then making us do a certain thing, or is this comparison just for us to be aware of what like the kind of benchmark is, or is this comparison just like, oh yeah, okay, but at the same time, have a good day, like you do your thing, I'll do mine, you do you, boo. Cool. Now I think there was a bunch of different things that I wanted to go over in terms of the different ways that we feel things, and actually being able to identify the different feelings, but that's something that I'll do in another episode. All I wanted you to take away from this one is that we all have feelings. We all have yucky feelings a lot of the time. It's very easy for us to understand when you're sad, angry, or mad, or happy. But, what about beyond that, in terms of the disappointment, in terms of, having envy versus jealousy, or having anxiety versus excitement? It's the story that we tell ourselves. From there, we can have physiologically something's happening in us and it's doing the same thing, but the backstory that we give ourselves to actually see where it is that we go from that point is where the difference can occur. So I want to do a couple of episodes looking at negative emotions and how we feel with them and how we deal with them from there, because this is something that I am starting to work on a little bit more now that I'm going into the new year and trying to really get on top of all of that. My job is busy. I have a lot of scrutiny attached with my job. I have a lot of people who talk about me as if I'm my work. So I'm going to come into this a lot, and the more that I can manage those emotions and the more that I can stay in check to actually know that nothing's personal, and not take things personal, and not kind of project how I'm feeling onto different people, that's where I'm going to be the strongest. I think for me to progress, because I'm in a field where I'm brand new in both things that I'm doing, or the biggest things that I'm doing. So I need to be able to take criticism. I need to be able to learn the best that I can, and I know that I will get caught up and not learn effectively if I'm emotionally just shattered from something like that. So anyway, well, this is the start of 2022. We're here. I'm hoping that you can learn something from this. I'm hoping I didn't repeat myself too much, because this is still something that I'm wrestling with myself, but I will be back with you in a fortnight. I hope you've checked out the episode with Tiana Wereta, and next week actually will be my 50th episode, my 50th interview episode, and I will be releasing that, and it will be with a special woman, someone that I have known all 21 years of her life to the day that she was born. So we hope that you enjoy that, and we hope you're looking forward to it. Please share this stuff around. It's invaluable that other people get to hear this message, and really love you all. So thank you for this opportunity to chat through it, and I'm looking forward to actually learning with you all as we go through this process. As always, DM me if you have anything you want to say. Other than that, take care and drive safely. Love you.